Hey everyone, it's time for another live look at the astrology. My name is Katie Sweetman, and this is your look at the astrology for March 27th through April 2nd, 2023. Yeah, we are crossing into April this week. What happened to March? I think we were all busy doing other things, and I know that we had a lot of big astrology in March, so the month kind of flew by. But if you're watching live, as always, do say hello. Every week we gather live to talk about the astrology and how the astrology is 50%. You are the other 50%. And so how do we work with these energies? And even like we had some pretty big deal changes in earlier in March and even last week. And maybe you remember me talking about Saturn in Pisces. Yeah, we are kind of coming up to our first month of Saturn in Pisces. This is something that's going to take us into the next few years. Wherever Saturn is, that area of our life, now the bar is set higher. For me, I like to have, the cheat sheet, so to speak. And so I like to know, where do I need to put my focus for the next few years? It's not the only place that I need to put my focus, but where am I being held to a higher standard? Where do I need to push myself? Where do I need to set some goals and work hard to achieve them? So yeah, Saturn is saying over the past few weeks, now it's time for a new hour in our lives. And wherever Pisces is in your chart, that area is where Saturn is concentrating its focus on. And then we had Pluto in Aquarius just last week. This one's kind of a bigger deal. I know, you hear me talk about it. You're like, really, Katie? Like, is it just another week, another big planetary change? I know, yes. So Pluto doesn't change signs very often. Now, Saturn changes signs every 3 years. Pluto changes signs anywhere from every 11 to 30 years. We're in the part of Pluto's cycle. Now, Pluto has this very elongated orbit. It takes 250 years to go through the zodiac sign. In our lifetime, we saw Pluto at its shortest bit. That's Pluto in Scorpio. My joke is about how Pluto in Scorpio is proof of a benevolent universe, because we only get 11 years of Pluto in Scorpio compared to 30 years of Pluto in Taurus. But that's not in our lifetime. Last time Pluto was in Taurus was the 1850s. I'm getting off track. So Pluto doesn't change signs very often, and the last time it did was 2008, January 2008. I think it was June of 2008, and then again, I might be kind of fuzzy about that June date, but definitely November 2008. And that began 15 years of doing some big, heavy lifting in the sign of Capricorn. We're starting to wrap up that chapter. Yes, Pluto is out of Capricorn. It's in Aquarius for the first time in 250 years, yeah. But Pluto will go back to Capricorn this year, and it'll go back and forth twice before making its final approach to Aquarius in November of 2024. So what we can kind of take from this is that we're sort of getting our first taste of Pluto in Aquarius, and it's kind of hard. Let me rephrase that. Maybe it's a little bit harder to detect it because Pluto's a very different energy than Saturn. Saturn's very real world. It's sort of the structures and the groundwork and sort of the frameworks for everything. But Pluto is that psychic material that can sit into that framework. And I think that's why we especially with Saturn in Capricorn 2018, 2019, 2020, it was a very interesting time. So yeah, we had this big shift last week. We're still getting a sense of what it can mean and how, a key area of our life and also a collective experience is going to start to shift over the next 20 years. I know, 20 years. Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for 20 years. So sorry, I can't speak. This is a good segue to the webinar that I'm doing on Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern. You can watch it live. You can also get the recording, and I'm going to do my first presentation on Pluto and Aquarius. What are the big themes that we need to start to look at? Really, how do we understand Pluto? Pluto is an evolutionary planet. This is why it's a bit different than, let's say, Saturn and Saturn changing signs. It means that there's a certain area of our life and even a collective experience that I say the astrology is 50%, but Pluto is a pretty big deal, the other 50%. meaning we have to learn to work with this evolutionary force that wants to get something to shift inside of us and also outside of us. But Pluto, you can even go back to the area of your life that Capricorn governs, depending on your sun and rising sign, and say, okay, what has changed in the Capricorn area of my astrology over the last 15 years? And if you are a Capricorn, and if you are a Cancer or a Libra or even an Aries, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because you guys really sat with this energy for 15 years and you saw your lives change in big ways. So yes, I'm doing a webinar. We're also going to talk about, how we can't quite rely on history because the world was very different 250 years ago. The consciousness of humanity was very different. And Pluto is trying to reveal consciousness by showing us the shadows that are in the way. So regardless, we are going to see some societal shifts over the next 20 years. But, on a personal level, how can we work with this energy is what we're going to talk about in our webinar. And I even did a little bit of a preview last week, if you watched my video, of what Pluto is activating in your astrology. And it is the same area that Saturn was for the past few years, but it's different because Saturn was a very structural influence and Pluto is a very psychic influence. And I think that to some degree, Saturn has been giving us some notes or laying some breadcrumbs for Pluto, and that's part of our bigger psychic, emotional, and spiritual work over the coming years. So yeah, there was that. And then also on the 25th, so just Saturday, a couple days ago, Mars finally got out of Gemini. Now that's a little bit more mundane. In fact, I think with everything going on last week, Mars got very overshadowed with everything that was going on. But I'm Mars ruled, I'm a Scorpio, so I was just like, please, God in heaven, can Mars please get out of Gemini? I'm done. So yeah, so Mars is now in Cancer, and it's going to be in Cancer for the next 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks. That's a normal amount of time for Mars in a sign, not 7 months. But hopefully we learned something. I'm still, digesting Mars in Gemini, and now we have to, I say learn something, because we also had a retrograde, and when there's a retrograde we have to do some work. We had a retrograde from October 30th until January 12th. So this week we are kind of light on aspects, which maybe that's a good thing. Maybe we need to catch our breaths, but we are, let's say, sitting more with Mars in Cancer. And because Mars is what's called the ruling planet of Aries, this is a little bit technical point, but it's an important point. And if you are studying astrology, study the rulerships. The basic concept is every sign of the zodiac has a boss. It's a ruler. And that ruler, that boss, can be anywhere else in the zodiac sign. So it points the energy of the sign someplace else. So when Mars went from when Mars went from Gemini to Cancer, the rulership of Aries season switched, went from Gemini to Cancer. Cancer is a water sign. It's cardinal water. It's primal water. It's that water energy, emotional energy. It's that emotional bond, family, home, past, memory, nostalgia, sense, memory. It's a kind of a rough and raw water, but it's that kind of water that connects us to life. That sense of feeling safe and secure. And that's the thing about Mars and Cancer. When we don't feel safe and secure, we get a bit cranky. From a traditional standpoint, Mars is not at home in Cancer. It's in what's called fall, but that's just a way to look at the way that Mars works best and the way that Mars doesn't work best. But in Cancer, Mars has to learn to connect to its empathy and its compassion, and to use that Mars energy to create emotional connection, an emotional bond. And sometimes that can dig up some deeper material. Mars is now in Cancer, and it takes the energy of Aries season, it points it towards Cancer. So as we get into the end of Aries season, this takes us all the way till April 20th, which is the date of the solar eclipse. We have a solar eclipse at 29 degrees of Aries. It means that we are in the energies of Cancer. When I think of Mars and Cancer and Aries, I think of like taking that energy and really aligning it with the things that make us, that are more important in our lives. Meaning, and this is the way to look at Cancer. Cancer, I think, doesn't always get its fair due, but it is one of the 4 cardinal signs, which means that it aligns with the 4 directions, and it's one of the 4 pillars of life. Meaning, without Cancer, without home, without family, without a sense of connection and anchorage, this is why for Scorpios or even Aquarius is the where is home, who is home, it hits us a deep point. We need family. And I realize, and especially because you're my clients and I hear your stories, home and family isn't always such a nice subject matter. And so maybe that's one of the buttons that Mars is pressing on over the next few weeks while it's in Cancer. But that said, we need home, we need family, or the people who are like family, or that sense of feeling like we belong someplace. And maybe it's not a physical connection, maybe it's an internal connection, because sometimes home is first within, then it can be outside of us. And so we really need to focus on the things that are important. The contrast to Cancer is another cardinal sign, which is Capricorn, exactly opposite. And that's a sign that teaches us that we need duty and responsibility. And without a sense of duty and responsibility and maturity, life collapses. It's like, that person, and maybe we've been that person at an earlier phase of our life, we just can't get it together. We've got to get our Capricorn going so our life can feel a sense of structure and support. But we can't overdo Capricorn. This is where we work 60 hours a week and then wonder why life is kind of imbalanced, and we're seeking that work-life balance. Well, Cancer is like, hey, at the end of your life, when your life flashes before you, are you going to be like, I wish I worked more? So this is our work. This is our good work. This is our good work while Mars is in Cancer. It's like, how do we create the balance? Because Mars's instinct is to be very self-motivated. It's a great leader, but it's more individualistic. And with the Mars exalted in Capricorn, this is part of the rulership and essential dignity for my students out there. That's where Mars excels, when it takes that energy and it uses Capricorn energy to build and construct and to be ambitious. So this is why Mars is a little bit in territory that it doesn't quite normally work well in. And this is just a reminder for all of us, but through Mars and Cancer, don't forget about the things that matter. God forbid, when your life flashes before you, you're like, I wish I did the things that mattered more to me, that made more connection in my life. And I realize that we live in crazy times and interesting worlds, and sometimes it's hard to make connection. It's hard to feel like we belong. And how do we use Mars's energy proactively and constructively over the next few weeks? And maybe this is something to keep in mind, because we are about a month out, or 3 weeks out actually, from a solar eclipse. Yeah, so we're creeping up on eclipse season, and it's kind of sandwiched in with Saturn changing signs and Pluto changing signs. So, I didn't want to forget about eclipse season, but I don't want to overwhelm you guys and have you like turn off your computers. Be like, oh no, I don't want to talk about eclipses. Yes, we're going to come up on eclipse season, and eclipse season, this is our every 6 months. The story changes. That's just life. It's just a new time where we focus our energies in different places, and this eclipse is going to be in Aries. And so Aries, as you may recall, we've been having eclipses in Taurus and Scorpio. We're going to start to phase out of that in 2024, thank the Lord, or 2023, thank God. But we do have one more eclipse in Scorpio on May 5th, and one more eclipse in Taurus on October 28th. But the eclipse on April 20th, just 3 weeks away, is our first eclipse in Aries. And so we're going to have eclipses in Aries and Libra, and that takes us into the next 18 months. So we're sort of shifting into this new collective story. Yes, astrology is just about understanding all these interweaving, interplaying stories. But what we can really predict with eclipses is that when we get to eclipse season, it's like a new hour. It's like the curtain comes down on one act in our life, and it's time for another act. So, and then I'm talking about Mars and Cancer It's like, how do we go into that eclipse season and use the Aries energy of motivation, action, desire, power, leadership, initiation to put it towards the things that actually feed and care and support us, Cancer. But we have lots more to talk about as we get closer to eclipse season. We're still digesting Saturn and Pisces and Pluto and Aquarius. So those are like the big points. Oh, the other big point that I want to talk about. So the major aspect this week is actually Venus conjunct Uranus. If you follow me on Instagram, I put the wrong information in my Instagram story. I think I put Venus square Uranus. It is Venus and Taurus conjunct Uranus. A conjunction just means two planets are in the same place in the sky. If you recall, and we've been talking about this for quite a while, Uranus has been in Taurus since May of 2018, May 15, 2018, and March 6 of 2019. Those two dates, because Uranus went into Taurus, retrograded, went back out, and then I think it was November 2018, then went back in March of 2019. And that started a big shift in like reinventing Taurus. And if you are a Taurus, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about. The personal story that I talk about is that I actually had a 20-year background in IT, in graphic design. And in 2018, the stable job that was sort of like, because I like stability, I'm a fixed sign, the stable job wasn't so stable anymore. And then long story short, I quit my day job in March of 2019 to do this full time. And I just hit my 4-year anniversary. So your dreams do come true. You can, my joke is that there is no playbook for quitting your job at 40 to become an astrologer, but I had to figure it out. Thank you very much. Thank you everybody for supporting me. But that's how that energy, even though I'm not a Taurus, I am a Scorpio. Taurus is my opposing sign. And how this energy can change your life. It's not trying to change your life to change your life, meaning it's trying to change your life so that whatever is inside of you has an opportunity to actually express itself. So Venus coming up to Uranus this week is another opportunity to break free of the past, which is ironic because we've been talking about Cancer, home, family, past, memory, senses. But there's no sentimentality with Uranus. Uranus, like, it's either for you or not for you. This either supports you or not supports you. And even when I was speaking with my Taurus clients over the past few years, I would say to them, like, what's the most radical thing you can do right now? And it's meant to be a provocative question. And I know clients might are like, why did she ask me this? Because that is the energy. What is the most radical thing you can do right now? Sometimes the most radical thing you can do is to set boundaries, or to say yes, or to say no, or to quit your job at 40 and become an astrologer, or do something else. Whatever is in your heart, because Uranus's job is it is an evolutionary planet, and his job is to get us to grow and evolve by any means possible. And that is why the 40s is culturally known as the midlife crisis, and astrologically it's called the Uranus opposition. And it's a time in the 40s where the universe throws you a bone and it gives you a chance to make big changes in your life. So you're like, I'm not in my 40s, but that energy of completely reinventing yourself and really focus on the things that are that matter to you, and sometimes taking care of yourself is the most radical thing you can do. Prioritizing your needs is the most radical thing you can do. Making sure your life runs on your currency, meaning not the currency of your parents, not the currency of your peers. What does currency mean? Meaning like that whatever money you make, it's like your money. It's like you value it. Doesn't matter what anybody else thinks. Whatever you need is the most important thing for you. But Taurus is a very nuts and bolts sign, and it really talks about making sure that we have our needs met. Cancer is emotional needs. Taurus is like roof over our head, food in the bank, money in the bank, food in the kitchen, and making sure that we really feel safe and secure in this world. And so maybe the most radical thing we can do this week is to feel safe, to feel grounded. So things may be shifting and moving on top of things shifting and moving, I know. And, Taurus is pleasure. Maybe the most radical thing you can do is to bring more pleasure beauty in your life. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus in Taurus, Venus is in its own sign. And this is also picking up on energy of the eclipses. We've been having eclipses in Taurus since November 2021. Then we had another set of eclipses, April, May of 2022, October, November 2022. So here we are starting to wrap up that story. However, Uranus will be in Taurus till 2025 and 2026. I think it's important for you all to reflect, especially if you know your astrology, how has that area of your life changed? Or have you seen your relationship with stability and security and money and income, how you earn it, how you spend it, how you invest it? Because Taurus, like the other fixed signs, talk about our material and manifested world. Yes, we are spirits in the body, but we still have bodies. We have to take care of them. So that said, that's your look at the astrology of this week in a nutshell. Let's look a bit further. Let's look at the astrology for this week of March 27th through April 2nd, 2023. By the way, it's my dog's birthday tomorrow. He turns 2. He still thinks he's a puppy. But anyway, so starting with the beginning of the week, March 27th, like I said, we're a little light on aspects this week. It's mostly, give or take, the moon driving the story, except for that Venus-Uranus conjunction later this week. But that said, the moon is, I think, now in Cancer. Is it still? No, I think the moon's still in Gemini. But Mercury, it's in Aries, and it's coming up on a conjunction to Jupiter, and that conjunction is tomorrow on the 28th of March. Mercury in Aries is typically very kind of impulsive, very quick thinking, driven by instincts, makes choices very quickly, communicates very quickly. Meeting up with Jupiter, maybe we're feeling the urge to travel, to explore, to see different perspectives, or even share our perspectives. And this also can pick up on the energy of starting a project, for example. But if you're getting a little bit of wanderlust as we start the week, it's because Mercury and Jupiter are coming up. And maybe this is also about making some choices that really launch something. There's a sense of initiation with the energy of Aries, especially anything that talks about home and family and really kind of securing your roots and your foundation. Then we go into the middle of the week, and then on Thursday, March 30th, Venus makes that conjunction to Uranus. So this is probably our 4th conjunction at this point. I think that first conjunction was way back in 2019, but I'm kind of getting off track a little bit. But there's been this kind of, predictable story ever since Uranus got into Taurus. And again, really looking at our relationship with money and income and value, and maybe our relationship with money is very unconsciously influenced by the past and family and parents and scarcity. And maybe the most radical thing you can do is to shift that story. Like I said, Uranus is very unsentimental. It doesn't have the same attachments to things. It's an evolutionary planet, for example. The other aspect that day is Mars in Cancer, making what's called a trine to Saturn and Pisces. This is a water trine. It actually creates some stability in the midst of that kind of really dynamic Venus conjunct Uranus energy. And so maybe we need that steady hand of Mars and Saturn. But it's sort of this reminder, especially with Saturn and Pisces, to really create the structure and sort of the frameworks, and to work and to the things that actually are really important in our lives. Because Saturn right now is behind the sun. It's in the 12th house of the sun. So this is that link between that sense of care and home and family, but also what's beyond this world, our spirituality and our faith. That's pretty much it for the big aspects this week. I think, again, everything else is lunar based. I know that we go into the weekend, the moon's going into Leo, and I think we all could use a little Leo moon. I think Leo, especially now that Saturn is out of Aquarius, Leo is about the joy and the fun and the passion of life. And I think that, again, that's something that doesn't always get its fair due, but between Aries, which is a fire sign, and Leo, which is also a fire sign. It's just this reminder that we need that spark of life. And especially if you've ever felt burnt out, it's because the spark of life has gone, extinguished. And to use this Leo moon as you go into the weekend to really nourish the things that actually give you that spark of life. So let's look at the astrology for each of the 12 signs, just your friendly reminder that you can listen for both your sun sign and your rising sign. I know everybody has their own opinions. It's both. It's two layers of data. They sort of work at different levels, but they work. So yeah, there you go. So let's look at the astrology for this week of March 27th through April 2nd, 2022, starting with Aries. Aries, happy birthday, Aries. So you finally had your planet Mars get the heck out of Gemini, where it had been sitting for the better part of 7 months. Over that time, you had to really focus on voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn, and even, getting into some stickier stuff as when Mars was retrograde and having to look at some of your impulses and your choices and how you speak and listen. That said, as of a couple days ago, March 25th, Mars, your planet, is now in Cancer. So this changes the focus in your life a bit and really focuses on home and family roots and foundation. A lot of the stuff I was talking about in the intro to this broadcast, and for you to really focus on the things that are important. Mars going through this part of your astrology means different things to different Aries, or even Aries rising. It's a time to focus on home and family, to maybe make a move, make a change in your household, maybe start a project in the home, remodeling, or even making sure that you feel safe and secure. This is a bit of an emotional time, so Aries, if this could maybe pick into a deeper story, depends on the person. This idea of are you getting your needs met? And if you're not getting your needs met, maybe you're going to start to feel a little bit cranky. That said, Aries, a lot of the focus right now, again, is on home and family, but let's not forget we had that major change just a few days ago when Pluto went to Aquarius. So this is a bigger chapter. It really talks about a much larger shift in how you connect to people, how do you make friends, how do you make community, and looking at the subconscious, unconscious, and the psychic material that either gets in the way of you making the type of connections that you want, or how you connect with the world at large, and maybe even how you see the world, sort of whatever social filter that you see things. But this is an area that's going to start to see a lot of big changes over the coming years. Oh, Aries, I want to add one more thing. Venus, which is a relationship planet, by the way, it is making that conjunction to Uranus in what's called your second sign of money and income. Just pay attention, because this area of your life since 2018 has been seeing some big changes in your relationship with money and income. Maybe you earn your living in a very different way. Maybe it's been more of a psychic and emotional shift with how you earn a living, or maybe you're working to make some big changes in how you create stability and security in your life. Taurus, you're a little bit in the spotlight this week, especially if you listen to my introduction. Yes, it's Aries season. Aries season for you is the time in your personal zodiac calendar when you're a little bit behind the scenes. You're coming to the end of your yearly journey throughout the zodiac signs, and it's time to rest, reflect, and contemplate. Venus is in your sign, so maybe you feel sort of this pulling forward at the same time pulling back, having to rest. That said, and we've talked about this many times, Taurus, you've had a planet in your sign since 2018, 2019, and that's Uranus. And again, this means different things to different Tauruses and Taurus risings, but I've seen a lot of Tauruses make big radical changes over the past few years, especially my Tauruses that are born at the beginning. For many of them, their lives, and sometimes even physically, they don't look the same that they did in 2018. That said, Uranus in your sign, by this year, 2023, Uranus will get as far as what's called 23 degrees of Taurus. A little bit of technical information, but it's what I want to say is that we're starting to get to the end of this story. And if you're born towards the end of the sign, maybe it's been, 4 or 5 years to really get to the point where Uranus is ready for you, or it's like time for you to make your big change. So Taurus, what is the most radical thing you can do right now? Is it running away and joining the circus? Is it quitting your job? Is it prioritizing yourself? Is it making some big personal changes, or even internal changes in your life? But it's a little bit of some dynamic and intense energy, and to really sit with what you're feeling and what the story is as Venus comes up to that conjunction on Thursday. Finally, Pluto in Aquarius, just sort of this reminder that Pluto is giving your first taste in what's called your career sign, and talking about the bigger psychic changes that are going to be happening, psychic, emotional, spiritual changes that are going to be happening in your professional life over the next few years and into the next 2 decades. Gemini, so Aries season for you. You're starting to wrap up your personal trip through each of the 12 signs in preparation for your season. So this is a time for you to think ahead, for you to look towards the future, to hope and dream, and to vision for what you want to happen in the coming year, or maybe even beyond. You had that new moon last week that was giving you that new beginning. But it's different now that Mars has gone into Cancer. So maybe it's more about the things that, really have more value to you, as opposed to maybe the things that were more impulsive ideas just last week. That said, Venus in the Uranus conjunction, it's happening in what's called your 12th. And the 12th for you, and we've talked about this especially over the past couple of years when Saturn was in Aquarius, and how this has been a bit of an existential time for you, Gemini. In 2018-2019, Uranus went into what's called your 12th sign. The thing about the 12th sign is that anything that's really going on in that space, you don't see it. It's happening either internally, or it's happening on a level that is outside this physical world. Spirituality, getting into these bigger questions about what do I believe in, what do I stand for. And so Uranus is trying to illuminate things that are typically in your blind spots. And maybe you have had some big shifts in what you believe in, or your relationship with your spirituality, your faith, even your relationship with your subconscious and unconscious. But that said, to see or feel, I should probably say feel, what is the story that's presenting itself to you as Venus comes up to Uranus on Thursday? That said, your planet, Mercury, it's still in Aries, and it's kind of coming up to that conjunction to Jupiter this week. So maybe you've got some big ideas, and maybe something has to move inside of you in order for those big ideas to happen. Cancer, a lot of focus on you this week now that Mars is in your sign. So after 7 months of Mars in what's called your 12th, and I don't know, maybe every Cancer is going to feel this differently, but maybe you didn't have a lot of energy over the last 7 months. Maybe you felt more inward, internal, needed to rest, needed to meditate, needed to get into deeper emotional and psychic material. But that said, Mars crossing the threshold of your sign, which it did on March 25th, so just a couple days ago, initiates a new season in your life. Mars in your sign is like having foot, hit the gas pedal, and maybe you got a lot more energy, and thank God, because it's probably not the past few months. And now you're like, okay, where do I go? What do I do? And you're ready to race ahead. Sometimes when Mars is in our sign, we're not exactly the best diplomat. We're more concerned about what we want, and we want it now, and we are motivated, and we have a lot of desire to go after and get it, which has its pluses and its minuses. So think about the things that you really want to go after right now, because you have Mars in your sign. But if there's a little bit of a back and forth with somebody, Mars isn't always looking to find the solution that works best for everybody. Mars just being Mars. That said, Venus is activating Uranus, and since 2018, 2019, this has been happening in something called your 11th. And to think, what was your relationship with friendship and community, society, humanity, social issues, social causes back in 2018 versus now? Maybe you have a completely different friend circle. Maybe you've opened up to the world in ways that you never have. Maybe you're still trying to find your place in the world. So for you to look into what is the story that's starting to present itself this week as Venus comes up to Uranus on Thursday, the 30th. But Venus is a major player in your astrology. It rules your fourth, about home and family, and maybe like, who is home? Where is home? Maybe that sense of family is also the people that are in your life, the people who are friends and community, and to really make sure that community supports you just as much as home and family supports you. Leo. So lots going on this week, Leo. First, let's check in on the big change that happened just a few days ago on March 23rd. That's Pluto in Aquarius, and Aquarius is a relationship sign. So whereas you had a lot of activity in that space 2020 up until the beginning of March of 2023 with Saturn, it's a different energy. Saturn was very structural, getting you to focus on the structural way in which you connect to people and make commitments and do relationship. Pluto is the psychic material, and you're at that very beginning of a new season of your life that's talking about a very big shift in how you connect with people. I know it's a big statement and one that's going to play out over a much extended 20 years, but if there was any let's say blocks in how you connect with people, Pluto is going to start to work on those blocks. So for Leo, just to sort of sit and see what is the story that's starting to present itself, not to make any judgments, just to kind of be quiet about it, take notes. While Pluto is in Aquarius this year, from March 23rd till June 11th, and then there's that retrograde on May 1st. What is the story around relationship and connection that's starting to present itself? That said, let's talk about career, because in May of 2018, for the first time in your life, Uranus, unless you're over 80 years old, probably not, for the first time in your life, Uranus went into your career sign. And it began a 7-year chapter of completely reinventing this part of your life. Now, for some people, that's quite literal. The career that they had in 2018, 2019 is not the career that they have right now. Or maybe it's been a breakthrough. Maybe they were kind of playing it safe, and now it's like time for them to really step out in the world and to be seen in ways that are very different. You have to understand that Uranus has one job, is to get you out of your own way. And so that's the thing, and to pay attention to that this week, because with Venus in your career sign, there is a big focus on your professional life right now. It's not just career, it's your public life, it's the title after your name, it's your ambitions, it's your sense of direction in the world. And so if we just took Uranus out of the equation, it'd be like, okay, it's time to really push forward in your professional life. But Venus conjunct Uranus says, don't forget, you have this mandate over the past few years to make big changes. So Leo, what is the most radical thing you can do in your professional life, or even in your direction in life? And maybe it's about going in a new direction, or maybe it's about finally letting go of any blocks, any resistance, so you can actually live in your professional life or live in the world what you've always, I guess, intended to live. Virgo. So your planet Mercury is in what's called your 8th, and it's been there. I think it's got a couple more weeks or a week. I can't remember if Mercury is moving fast or not at this point in the story, but it's a little bit of an emotional time for Virgo, and maybe looking at the deeper feelings, less psychological material that's coming up at this time. Jupiter is in this space with you, and maybe maybe everybody's been using this differently. I think Jupiter, one of the ways we can look at Jupiter in this space is that it really gives you the opportunity to do a lot of deep emotional work. Maybe it gives you a sense of confidence or fortitude, or that sort of that knowledge, that faith to go into the deepest, darkest parts of yourself. For another Virgo, it could talk about trust, intimacy, vulnerability, letting people in, letting people into the sort of the uncomfortable and vulnerable spaces. For another Virgo, it's financial. And, Jupiter is like, whether it's to accumulate wealth or accumulate resources or to create more financial security and stability in your life. Or maybe it's to look at the estate. I know that's kind of a bummer topic, but, the 8th is also estate planning, wills, inheritances, and insurance. It's so glamorous, but I'm a Scorpio. We talk about these things. So that said, Aries season sort of takes you through this deeper psychological and emotional material. The other thing is that Mars is now in Cancer. So for you, Virgo, Cancer is your, is your 11th sign. So it's come out, it's been a long time in your career sign. And maybe it's worth going back and reflecting, Virgo, on what has shifted and changed in your professional life or even your ambitions and directions since August of last year when when Mars first went into your career sign. Now it's about the future. If you look at your astrology, Mars has now moved out of the 10th and now it's in the 11th. The 11th is almost to the end of your personal astrology. And this is where we start to look ahead. Like, where do I want to go? What are my visions for the future? What are my hopes and wishes and dreams? And it's looking out towards humanity and society, but on a more mundane level, it's about friends and community. Now, either you feel very motivated and very self-directed to network for your professional life, make connections, alliances with people who you kind of see eye to eye with, or maybe Mars is just pushing buttons and maybe something can come up that's a little bit testy in a friendship or a group situation. That said, you got your first little taste of Pluto in Aquarius. This is part of the bigger psychic shift in your relationship with your health and wellness, how you take care of your body, and the systems that run your day-to-day life. Libra. So Aries season for you is a time for you to focus on relationship. And I mean all relationships, small R relationship, big R relationship, whatever you got going on in your life. And so do keep in mind that we are 3 weeks away from a solar eclipse in Aries. And so this tells us that you are coming up to a change in the story about relationships. So whether it is about a relationship coming into your life or change in an existing relationship or an existing relationship coming into a new phase, sometimes that new phase because two people move in together, two people move to another state, to another place, or maybe the birth of a child, or it's a bigger milestone in that capital R relationship. But that said, the energy of the season is now pointing towards Cancer, and Cancer is your career sign. So maybe you're thinking about, regardless of whether it's romantic relationship, capital R relationship, or just how you interact and connect with people. I think the presence of the presence of Mars in Cancer is really talking about, how do you, connect with people where you're actually building towards the future. What is your commitment to people, whether it's on a day-to-day level or whether it's the relationships of your life? Like, how do you really show up for people, for example, and take on that responsibility in a relationship or a partnership? And maybe it is about you and another person really thinking about the future and taking steps towards a new chapter in your time together. Like I said, this is all in advance of eclipse season. You're going to have an eclipse in Libra, but that's not going to be until October of 2023. That said, Mars, will make a trine to Saturn. So I think, whatever changes are happening, it's like you really start looking towards the future. And I think sometimes Saturn is cooler heads prevail. I will say that Libra, Uranus has been in what's called your 8th sign since 2018, 2019. And every Libra is going to live this time differently, but Uranus has been trying to turn on the lights for you to see the things, sometimes the emotionally uncomfortable things that have always been there so that you can actually deal with it. And Uranus is very unsentimental. And it's really saying why are you still holding on to this stuff? Let's go get therapy. Let's do some work. And I realize, 5 years of this, it's a macro bit of time, but really to sit with the story as Venus comes up to Uranus this week and sort of checks in on that story that began in 2018 and 2019. Oh, and Venus is your planet too, Libra. So really, you're going to feel this because it is your planet. And what is Uranus trying to reveal to you? Scorpio. Aren't you glad, Scorpio, that Mars is out of Gemini? That was a big, heavy duty time because Gemini is what's called your eighth. We don't always think that Gemini and Scorpio have much in common. They seem like two very different signs, but Gemini is the reminder to Scorpio that life is about choice. And at the root of the past 7 months are the choices that you make. Are they supportive choices? Are they self-destructive choices? How do you choose yourself? How do you choose vulnerability, intimacy, connection on a deeper level, or even choosing your emotional health? That said, Mars is now in what's called your ninth. So the next 5 to 6 weeks is about focusing on the world. Scorpio is going to live this differently depending on who you are, but this is either where you really look towards the world, you want to travel, you're thinking about a big trip, you want to get out of here because you spent so long with Mars and Gemini in the eighth. So whether you're planning a big trip, or maybe it's just looking at the world in different ways, whether you're focusing on education over the next 5-6 weeks, taking classes, educating yourself just on a broader sense. But this is also a time when you have to really figure out what you believe in, what you stand for, what your truth and conviction is. It's a very philosophical time for Mars in Cancer for you. It doesn't add an emotional quality to your experiences in Cancer. It can be a bit instinctual. It wants something, it needs something, it wants connection, it wants family, it wants travel. So this is a time for you to really take care of yourself, Scorpio. That said, I think the big focus this week is Uranus and Venus over in your relationship sign. So don't forget, Scorpio, that since May 2018, March of 2019, Uranus has been in your relationship sign, which means that over the past 5 years, all relationships, small r, big R, have had to change. I have seen the gamut with my Scorpio rising clients, from end of marriages, starting of a new relationship. I've had Scorpios that were single for 10 years and then somebody kind of comes in that's a bit different. And maybe the most radical thing that can happen right now, Scorpio, is that you actually trust somebody. They actually let people in. Regardless, Uranus is trying to evolve and transform connection in your life, also putting the pressure on you because Uranus is opposing you. And it has been opposing you since 2018, 2019. So here comes Venus, and here's the next step, in theory, in the whole big story. Is something dramatic going to happen? I don't know. Maybe not. But I wouldn't sleep on this aspect, but I would also sort of not necessarily project, but it's what is the story around relationship and connection that's starting to reveal itself? Sagittarius. So where's Jupiter? Jupiter is in Aries. It's been in Aries since the end of last year. And Aries for you is what's called your fifth sign. And the fifth sign is about creativity, self-expression, joy, getting back to that spark of what makes you you. Of course, every Sag is going to live this differently, but don't forget who you are. Maybe that's the most important thing out of this transit. Or maybe you're really focusing on the things that give you life, that are creative, that kind of light you up. For example, Jupiter is not going to be in Aries for that much longer. In fact, by the middle of May, it's going to go into Taurus. So just sort of keep that in mind. Maybe that's a good segue to Uranus in Taurus, which has been in what's called your sixth sign of health and wellness in your day-to-day life since May 2018, March 2019. Sagittarius rising, you're all going to live this differently. I have seen the gamut. I've seen Sagittarius who've had major changes in their health over the past 3, 4, 5 years. I've had Sagittarius make big changes in a positive, proactive way in their health and wellness, change in their diet, change in even how they structure their day-to-day life, meaning whether it's working from home, whether it is becoming self-employed working from home, or whether it's making your day-to-day life look very different than it was in 2018, 2019. And even for some Sagittarius, it is to be in your body instead of always being in your head. That said, with Venus coming up to that space, this is that next link in the story that brings you back the past couple of years. What is the most radical thing you can do? Choose yourself, take care of yourself, inhabit yourself, change your diet, change your wellness. Like I said, every Sagittarius is different. That said, Mercury in making that conjunction to Jupiter this week, it is a week for romance, however you want to define that. Whether it is the romance of life, or that's romance with another person, or just being in the fun and pleasure of life. Capricorn. So let's go back to Saturn. Your planet, it's in Pisces for almost a whole month at this point. So what's changed? Has anything changed? Do you feel different? Pisces is a very different lens for you to live your life versus Aquarius, where you lived your life the past few years. Pisces is more spiritual, existential, intuitive, emotional. And this is also a time for you to really find your voice. And this is a point that I'm going to keep coming back to over and over again, but it's like, how do you use your voice? Capricorn, do people hear you? And you may be thinking, of course people hear me, I can speak. But this is the thing, most people, with the words that come out of their mouth are not them. How do you then discover what is inside of you that's truly you, and inhabit your voice? This could be the gamut of things, whether you focus on writing projects or really the mechanics of speaking and communicating over the next few years, or you make education a priority, or you have to really be in the authority of what you have to say, or really the accountability of what you have to say, for example. That said, it's Aries season. Aries season is about focusing on home and family roots and foundation, really focusing on the home, for example. So it's a bit of a shift now that Mars is in Cancer. Cancer is a relationship sign. It's going to mean different things to different Capricorns. So it's a time to focus on all relationships, but also small r and capital R relationships. Maybe this is where you and somebody in your life, you're thinking about moving in together, settling down, focusing on the future, focusing on the things that really talk about creating a life with somebody. Or if you're in an existing relationship, Mars may be pushing buttons, because Mars in this part of your chart isn't typically the diplomat. And if there's something that's been, kind of on the back burner between you and another person, it's going to come to the forefront. Or you feel very motivated to really focus your time and energy on relationship and actually making connection, like, solid connection, especially now that, Saturn is in Pisces. Maybe you're thinking very differently than you were even 3-4 weeks ago. Oh, Taurus. Taurus is what's called your fifth sign. So this has been 5 years at this point of reinventing who you are. That, of course, is going to mean different things to different Capricorns, but look at the version of who you were and how you expressed yourself in 2018 versus who you are now. The idea is that Uranus is trying to get you closer to actually who you are, meaning what is inside of you, not what's in your mind and what you think from a social or a societal or even from a peer and family level who you should be, but also what is inside of you. And what is inside of you is the most important thing. So to really sit with the story that's kind of coming up this week as Venus makes its conjunction to Uranus. Aquarius. So Saturn is out of your sign. It's now in Pisces. So you're in that first month, that first 4 weeks of Saturn focusing on money, income, material stability, and material security. The next few years is going to mean different things to different Aquariuses. For some Aquariuses, it's need to really create material stability in your life. Saturn is in Pisces, so that material stability and security has to be aligned with your deeper values, like your spiritual values, your heart values. For example, it's not money for money's sake. For some Aquariuses, it's the time to really kind of get money and income in order, to really work on, reevaluate, realign what is of value and what is not of value, and also self-worth. That said, Saturn left Aquarius and then Pluto made its first dip into Aquarius. It is hard to say what the impact of Pluto in Aquarius is going to be right now, because it's only going to be 3 months. This is just a 3-month preview For you Aquarius, objectively, we can say that this is the start of a major chapter in your life. Like Pluto has walked across the threshold of your sign and is like, okay, Aquarius, I'm here to make some big changes. Now, Saturn's very different. Saturn's very much the structure of life and the things that we have to do. Pluto is the psychic and emotional and unconscious material that is sort of sits in that. And that's where Pluto can be a real transformation and reformation of what is there. So Pluto on some level is going to be saying to you over the coming years, do you know who you are? And this is going to be different for, like an Aquarius sun versus Aquarius rising, but really needing to make some big, kind of seismic or structural or psychic shifts in your life. The example, personal example I use is that when Pluto crossed into my first, this is from the rising perspective, not the sun perspective, I moved to New York. That was like like a huge shift for me. I kind of needed to reinvent myself. So that is an energy, at least symbolically, that is with you over the coming years. That said, Taurus for you is what's called the part of your chart that talks about home and family, and it's the very roots of your chart. And Uranus has been there since 2018, 2019, and your household and even where you live may look very different now than it did in 2018, 2019. So here comes Venus, and it's the next step in a much bigger story of discovering where is home and who is home, or that psychic shift that needs to happen in order for you to come into your life and to feel safe and secure. Finally, Pisces. Pisces, so how are you feeling over the past few weeks with Saturn now in your sign? Do you feel a difference? Or you're like, no, Katie, I don't feel a difference. Regardless, you are in the start of a 30-year chapter. I know 30 years, it's a crazy amount of time. But that's what Saturn does. It talks about the bigger arcs of our life. When Saturn comes into our sign, or Saturn crosses into our rising sign, it's the start of a new beginning. It means now the bar is set higher for you. Typically, Saturn in our sign, our rising sign, we have to be more self-reliant. We can't necessarily rely on other people anymore. And there's pluses and minuses to that. Maybe you need to be more self-reliant. Maybe you need to have a stronger sense of being able to take care of yourself or stand on your own 2 feet. Maybe there's been like an inequity in how you rely upon other people. Or maybe this is a time to really take that Saturn energy and to apply it in your life and to really work to create, to shape, to build, to become something. Because Saturn can be your best ally. It can be almost like your life coach. So really, sit with Saturn energy like you would a life coach and think about your goals, your ambitions, write them down, create an outline. Saturn loves that stuff. Saturn's like, okay, if this is your goal and this is what's in the potential of your life, I'm going to really help you work. But Saturn is going to, again, really help you work. There's no slacking the next few years, for example. That said, it's Aries season. Aries is a sign that talks about money and income for you. It's really focusing on your material life right now. And as Mercury makes that conjunction to Jupiter, maybe you're looking at investments in your household, home, family. Maybe you're like making big purchases. Maybe it's something about relationships and making sure that you and a relationship are in alignment on a value and worth level. Just a little heads up, Pisces, Jupiter, your planet, is going to leave Aries on May 16th. So a couple more months of really focusing on material stability and security. Then things start to shift on May 16th when Jupiter goes into Taurus. Good segue. Uranus has been in Taurus since 2018, 2019, and that part of your life talks about voice, communication, how you think and listen and learn. And the idea is that how you communicate is very different than it is the past few years. You have to understand that communication is both the words out of your mouth, but it's also your ability to inhabit those words, to express who you really are, or to even believe in the authority or have the confidence to express yourself. So it's going to be different things to different Pisces, just to really go back and look at what the story is, because here comes Venus and it's another link in the story. And then when your planet gets there on March 16th, Jupiter, it's going to activate that story even more. But we will talk about that later. So there you go. that is your look at the astrology for March 27th through April 2nd, 2023. And, it's always lovely to see you all. I see some familiar faces, and I know you guys are my clients, or you watch every week, and I deeply appreciate your support, for example. So anyway, do follow me online, poweringastrology.com. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, YouTube, or you can sign up for my mailing list. I do put out a newsletter first thing every Monday morning. I also talk about, from time to time, my webinars, and I do have a webinar this week on Pluto in Aquarius, where we're going to get super nerdy about the potentiality of a Pluto in Aquarius for the next 20 years, but more importantly, the effect that it's going to have, the potential effect it's going to have on your sign over the next 20 years. I know, crazy. I also have other webinars. We just had Saturn and Pisces, and you can go to the link in the show notes and to learn all about that. So I appreciate you all. Thank you for the happy birthday for my puppy dog, who's always underneath my feet, it seems. And there you go. Take care. Bye-bye.